through how much the cost is going to be. And then we'll talk about offerings. So one of the things to consider is, what does the host extend? So you can extend certain modules, you can extend everything. There are certain third parties you could keep as part of your program as well that the site can take advantage of. And so as a site, do you want to take that whole package? Do you want to take pieces of it? Are you allowed to take pieces of it? What is really included in that offering is something to consider, again, both when extending out as well as when you are that site getting that functionality. I do have culture on here. We'll talk about culture a little bit more later, but it is important to have a similar culture or the right culture fit when you are deciding what your site or what your host is going to be. So ensuring y'all get along, you have similar communication strategies. Like I said, we'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute, but culture is something to consider as well. And then ongoing support. So remember, this isn't just the implementation. It's not just, okay, I get Epic and now everything's magical and it's perfect. You do have to consider the ongoing support and maintenance model that you're signing up for or that you're extending. Do you have the right staff mix to be able to support both your healthcare organization as well as any of your sites? And from a site perspective, do you have the right amount of support that needs to be there in order to support this as well? Do you have the staff that may need to fill in some of the gaps that the host may not provide? And then roles and responsibilities. So there are a lot of things that go into extending Epic from a Community Connect perspective. So you're thinking about networking, there's tunneling, there's training. There's a lot of things other than just the software itself. And so ensuring that when you're evaluating whether this is the right type of program for you, you have the staff and the roles at your organization so that everything is covered. And it's something that you work together with your host and your site, but making sure you talk through those things to determine who's going to do what, so that there aren't any gaps, but there also isn't a bunch of overlap either. And I know I've talked a little bit about this already, but staffing. So throughout your project, whether it's planning for it, whether it's doing the implementation, or whether it's during your maintenance and support timeframe, it's important to have the right staff in place to be able to execute on those initiatives. There are different models you can use. You can use existing staff, you can get new staff, you can use short-term staff through a consulting firm. But just keeping in mind what staffing is going to be required, again, both from the host side as well as the site thing, is important. Autonomy. So when we talk about autonomy, as Lindsay mentioned, Epic's Community Connect program is when you extend your instance of Epic to someone else. Well, with that goes a lot of maintenance and build, and one of the things to consider is how much autonomy will the site or will sites have to make their own customizations. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean new development, but rather maybe a tweak here or there to a setting that isn't consistent with the rest of your organization. We'll get into this a little bit as well, but with governance, it's helpful to have governance in place so that there's a mutual understanding of what can and cannot be altered. But when you're getting into the relationship and you're evaluating whether someone is the right fit for you or not, that level of autonomy is something important to discuss so that both parties are on the same page. And then technical debt. So some sites might come in with some technical debt, meaning they have systems that need to be replaced, or perhaps aren't on a version that are compatible with integrating with Epic. So it's something that needs to be considered as part of your total cost of ownership as well, either in the good way because you'll get rid of technical debt, or in a way that you need to address before moving forward with the program. And then from a host perspective, you'll also want to evaluate whether you have any technical debt, because you don't want to extend that technical debt to a site. All right, so then let's say you've decided to choose Epic Community Connect, either the host or a site. There are some things that you'll want to consider as you go through that program. So some of the things that we're going to point out today, the first is common goals. So making sure that you as the host organization and the site have goal alignment is very important. It's important to understand what the goals of each party are, that the goal is clear, that actions being taken contribute to obtaining those goals. It's very important that stakeholders are aligned and understanding what's the overall purpose, why are we doing this. Nobody wants to do something just because. So it is quite important to understand the why behind everything and what are you trying to achieve. And to do this, you'll want to include the right people. So by this, I mean the different types. So are decision makers included? Are the people that are doing the delivery or implementation included? Are the support services included? Ensuring that each phase of the project has those representatives so that everybody's on the same page and moving towards the same common goal. And then you'll also want to make sure the right roles are included when you're talking about this type of initiative. So you'll want to include operations, finance, business, clinical, technical, legal. So there are a lot of different parties that are involved when trying to decide, okay, we've decided on Epic Community Connect, how do we move forward? So making sure all those roles are included, so again, everybody's on the same page and moving toward that common goal is really important up front. So let's talk about ROI. I'm sure you are all familiar with generating business cases for things that you want to get implemented. And a big part of that is oftentimes articulating what the ROI will be. So it's important to identify what ROI goals you have early so that you can measure baselines when appropriate or when possible. But again, having that common understanding of where are we trying to get to, why are we trying to get there, where are we going is very important, and how do we measure it, and how do we make sure we're successful. So it's great when both parties, both the host and the site, can understand the other's ROI goals as well, because then you can help each other get there. One thing to keep in mind is that ROI does not have to be financial. I think when a lot of folks think of ROI, it's just the dollars, which clearly are very important. But it's also, you could also measure some of those non-financial things to help encourage the ROI and to help articulate why you're doing this. So some things could be time savings, which you can equate to dollars if you want to do that, but also things like patient satisfaction, provider satisfaction. You know, if you're a provider and you can automatically see this patient's data, even though they were somewhere else and they didn't get their services directly through you, that's great. That's probably a great provider satisfaction. Similarly with a patient, if you can go from one facility to another and they don't ask you the same 40 questions over and over again, you're probably pretty happy about that because all of your information is in that one system. So remember, when you're thinking of ROI, it's not just the pure finances, which again, I understand are quite important, but there are other things you can consider as well. One thing I will point out is this using Epic's native functionality piece. That can be a key part of your business strategy or your ROI considerations as well, because if you're using Epic's robust native functionality, that may eliminate some third parties that you have to use, or it may eliminate some third parties that you would have had to purchase if you were still using your legacy system. It also may eliminate some cybersecurity risk because it's all coming from one place. So keep in mind those things as well as you work through ROI and you work through your goals and setting them and measuring them. All right, I know I said before that we were going to talk about culture a little bit more thoroughly, so here's that slide, which we'll do now. So I wanted to just talk about when you're evaluating whether a host or a site is the right fit for your program, it's important to consider culture. So culture obviously can mean a lot of different things, so I put some things on this slide just to talk through briefly.